Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to Simi, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. I haven't really talked much about, in the last few days, I'd say maybe weeks, I haven't said a whole lot about the struggle between different nationalities. And when I started to record on that, I got phone calls again. It always happens. One of the reasons that you hear me curse so much is because I'm frustrated by the sheer coincidence of phone calls when I'm in the middle of a good recording and a hell of a brainstorm, and then the phone rings. And I'm not interested in why the phone rang at that particular point. I don't believe in coincidence. I don't believe in that. So that's not an answer. It's not an acceptable answer to me. I'll blame the devil before I say, oh, it's just a coincidence. What, every time? Twice might be a coincidence. But any reliable phenomenon is not just a coincidence. But when it comes to the grudges that our nationalities have within the race, I'm going to point out some things that have been a bit distressing to see to any black person with a mind. One of the things that is distressing to see is a common topic that comes up over which we are fighting with each other or arguing with each other, and that's music. I do not give a rat's behind about music when it comes down to things that are supposed to be of substance. It matters not to me who started what genre of black music. It doesn't matter to me which nationality is responsible for which genre of black music, because music is one of those things where genres have always influenced each other. And if black folks have to have debates about the relationship between reggae and dancehall and soca and calypso and Afro beats, and then rhythm and blues and R&B and rock and roll and rap and hip hop, then all this means is that black folks have always been influencing each other. And that does sound about right, because if I had to make a song right now and I had to compose and produce a beat for it right now at this point, it would probably be a dance hall beat or an Afro beats beat with lyrics coming out of AAVE and some lyrics coming out of Jamaican patois and maybe even some pidgin English. I'm going to tell you all that since I'm in a position to be able to spy on other people and report back to black folks sometimes, depending on who's talking about what at any given time, I will let you all know this. You may be various nationalities, and we are various nationalities, and we should be. But I'm also going to tell you guys that by the same token, even to non-black folks that don't hate us, they see us fairly monolithically. We do not take our views of ourselves from somebody else's views of us. So I don't tell you this so that you and I start to view ourselves as monolithically, as other people might do. That's not fair. I'm telling you this so that you understand what our common interests are, so that we can, in fact, start to view each other or view ourselves cooperatively, not monolithically, but cooperatively. That part's important. And I don't apologize for saying that. We need a cooperative view of each other. We need a view that does not argue about who started what particular genre of music, unless, of course, you got proof. And that means forget an argument, just produce the proof. But that's the kind of view that we're going to need. We need that view. We need absolutely no view of each other or of ourselves that involves argument over something you can't prove anyway. And yet and still, that's what we have done to ourselves. This is how we have limited ourselves. We pretty much said, hey, let's go argue with each other over some genres of music, none of which has ever liberated the black race or any nationality they're in. And while we're sitting up here debating about these sorts of things and arguing about that, the nations that are involved in what you might call liberation, well, ironically, those nations, my people, those nations are not involved in this argument. You see, this is largely an Anglophone phenomenon. The rest of us aren't involved in that. The Lusophone black person's not sitting up and just trash talking black Americans. And by the way, there has been one who has had to hear his own family members talk down about something, even though they don't hate us, they just disagree, but they still were out of pocket. And this man went and stood up to his own family on our behalf, and there wasn't one of us around. Nobody was there to put a battery in his back. This man pretty much just sat up and said, you know what? This is the wrong way to talk about our cousins who never did anything wrong to us. Close your mouth. They're not the problem. They didn't do it. They didn't start it. They didn't cause it. That's what this man said to his own family members. He's one of my subscribers, Senor Kanga. His attitude when you were dealing with folks from the continent who think anything about race at all. I mean, there are folks from the continent who don't think about race. They think about tribe, language, nationality. They don't think about race. I'm not discussing them right now with this point, but when you come across black folks who think about race at all and they're coming out of the continent, they are more likely to think about race the way Senor Kanga does, cooperatively, than they are to think about race the way that some of the stereotypes that we call tethers think about race. The Sambos that really are not limited to a nationality, but are just overly happy to sit up and talk bad about any black folks anywhere, period, because, well, that's how they get their points from massa. That's how they've gotten their points from massa for a long time now. It's nothing new. Sambos and sellouts and coons, well, there was a time when African Americans didn't buy black unless we were forced to buy segregation. And how do we know? Well, desegregation showed us that. Once there was desegregation, what did we do? We went and we bought from massa. And Malcolm talked about this in the North before desegregation. He said, you got black folk that'll pay 5 times what a house is worth just to go live next to some white folk. Meanwhile, the black folk who can pass as white are sick and tired of white folk. And he knew because he had conversations with some of them because they would report to him. Walter White was one. He spied on them and he reported back to the NAACP. I know because there are times I've sat up and just listened to people talk, and I can't even pass as white, but I've listened to some people just have some cash to talk about, or trash, I should say, to talk about black folk. And I can tell you that when I've heard people express disagreement with black folks, it normally has been a nationality of black folks within our race expressing a disagreement with another nationality. When I've heard people just disparage or dehumanize us, they weren't black, or if they were, they didn't know it. That's been the difference. Most black folks don't walk around here with a real self-hatred. Now, we have an inferiority complex, but it's not always a full-blown self-hatred. Southeast Asia, they'll sit up and put skin bleach on first chance they get. We got to tell them that, hey, you look good, dark. What's your problem? We got to tell them this. They don't believe it until they hear some of us say it. But even then, Let's take a look at what they have. Okay, they got an inferiority complex. Full blown self hatred? Not quite. They don't quite have that. And I'm glad they don't, and I don't want to see them develop that. So, an inferiority complex, which is damn near global, is in fact different from full blown self hatred, just to be fair. Just so that we don't go around telling people to fix that which isn't broken and to ignore that which actually is. That's all. I'm not saying this to argue semantics, but to be fair and just to certain definitions for your benefit in the long term, for my own benefit too, because I'm selfish like that. But look, my people, let me tell y'all, the loyalists amongst us and the sellout Sambos amongst us have all they've all come from various nationalities. The Mali revolt in Brazil was betrayed by two black brasileiras at that time. They were, I think, two free women, and they just went ahead and they could tell that these men were meeting about something they didn't want anybody else to know about, and so they went and snitched, and they forced the planners of the rebellion to move the dates up. Instead of abandoning all plans, they forced them to just move the dates up. Yeah, that's an issue. This is not an ADOS phenomena or an FBA phenomena. This happened in Brazil. They were betrayed. That's not the only time that this has happened. What I'm going to tell you guys in a nutshell is that our arguments have been pretty much limited to some foolishness. Tyler's not really worth arguing over. However, I will say that the black American market this time did the right thing. I just hope they did it for the right reasons too. 3,000 album sales. Good. Good. That's it. That was 3,000 too many. But if we're going to argue, there are things about which we can argue that go well beyond music. And the truth be told, we still have enemies that are not even from within the race. And we got a few of them that are from within the race, but they come from various nationalities. We still got enemies and they have substantial plans against us. It's not just about undermining music per se. Music, while it helps people cope with the lack of liberation, it does not actually liberate. And that's been the truth of the matter. It's not an instrument of liberation unless it is going to be used as a code by which to plan subversively. And when that gets decoded, everybody participating in that gets locked away. They don't play. Oppressors do not play about that. You're not going to sing them out of their advantages. You see, music is the voice of the rebellion sometimes, depending on its use, but it is not an actual weapon of rebellion. So if we sit up and we argue about this stuff all the time, when the fact is that genres of music have always influenced each other anyway, period, within and between races, then you're wasting time. Fact is, we got other things to argue about, like lifestyle, like how we're going to handle the subject of sex as a race, how we would treat marriage as a race, like what double standards are going to be needed in order to restabilize black families because they're under attack regardless of nationality. It doesn't matter. And it ain't the men that are surrendering. It's because the men have this race loyalty that the women oftentimes don't have. And that's been going, at first, at one point, we thought that African Americans were different. Turns out, no, not really. sistering with their fist in the air, talking about crystals and head wraps and all this other stuff, been having white dudes as sneaky links. Been going on. All this time I couldn't imagine it because light skinned brothers weren't they pick. Now it turns out actual white dudes are. And that's been going on in the islands and in the Caribbean. We already knew about that. First, I thought that the women from the continent were just not really picky one way or another. I thought they were race neutral. Come to find out, oh no, white guys don't have to do as much to get them as brothers do. That's what it comes down to. I saw it in an Hollywood movie back in the 90s. Didn't realize what the hell I was seeing. There was an Hollywood movie where a white guy living in Nigeria kicked a sister out of his house. The servant had to go and push her and expel her out. She was sitting up with her friends crying later on, and one of them came in and asked in that accent, "Why? What are you crying for? Why are you crying? These men are so easily replaceable." And another one said he was a whitey, and I was like, "Oh damn." This is somewhere between 98 and 2001 that I saw that snippet of that movie. I said, "Oh damn, this is not okay. I'm not all right with that." Because that shouldn't have even been a line in the movie. And then in another movie, there was this actress that played the role of a woman that was in love with a thug, telling her parents that his thuggery ignited a passion in her she couldn't resist. Bitch, what? So this was going on in Nollywood movies in the early 2000s and late 90s. You can get you a thug ninja or you can get you a whitey, but a regular brother ain't shit. That's Nollywood. It happened there before it even happened in Black America or on some made for BET movie. We have bigger and better things to argue about if they're even going to be arguments. Most of the time, we don't even have to worry about that. While we're sitting up here arguing about maybe reparations, which is substantial, however, that's not, it hasn't even happened yet. And then other than that, arguing about music, let me tell you all what's really going on back home on the continent. And I got to give a shout out to Neferkari Desalegn for pointing this out to us. The AES apparently has some of the best intelligence agencies on the continent because when they have been able to stand against France, they've been able to stand against France with receipts. And not only that, they have picked one of the best times in history for the three of them together to collectively tell France, take this middle finger and fit the guck out. What is the reason for that? Well, BRICS has done certain things and made certain moves, and in light of that, that has taken away some of the sanctioning power of the states and its most loyal allies. The Western hegemony in general, period, can't easily sanction anybody anymore. Because there's an alternative payment system. There's more than one, I'm sure, at this point. And so now what this is allowed is it has allowed these three to form the AES, and these three who make up the AES have pretty much told France, you can fit the guck up out of here. Matter of fact, and the rest of Western Europe can get up out of here too. You gets nothing. And not only that, but they've been able to catch some of their sellout leader Sambos in negotiations with the French embassy, and in turn in negotiations with the French president. From Sarkozy to Macron right now. I want y'all to stop and think about that. They've been wiretapping diplomatic headquarters. And that's how they've been catching a lot. Assimi Goita, who I believe is in charge of Mali right now. I forgot the name of the president of Niger, but Assimi Goita is the one in charge of Mali. Installed someone, put a civilian, a retired military staffer into power, then found that man selling out and overthrew him and took over, and then told the West, screw y'all. At this point, you don't get to dictate a damn thing. I'll run the presidency on my own. I will run the country on my own. And now he and Captain Traore are catching plot after plot after plot. And in this last one, where they arrested 55 Malians, they also got a major French spy. Busted him too. I think his name was Jan L'Huillier. He talked about what role he played in the overthrow of Gaddafi and the funding of groups that were responsible for something that it doesn't quite rhyme with tourism, but it kind of rhymes with terrorism, kind of. Funded them. He said this. This is a time when black Muslims in Western Africa, I told you all that if you want to see black unity, you can see it in the Muslims. And this is a time when black Muslims in Western Africa are pretty much saying, we are not going to let even these folks who are willing to pick up guns and fight in the name of religion, we're not even going to let them take over and tell us what the hell to do. In a nutshell, they ain't black enough. And really, I would tell you they ain't Muslim enough. Because the paradigm they would uphold would still be a paler paradigm. Well, it would still be that of a paler hierarchy telling a darker mass of people what to do. And we're not going to tolerate that. The Anglophone black Muslim of whatever nationality and the Francophone black Muslim and the Lusophone black Muslim of whatever nationality is no longer going to tolerate this. And those of us that were silent about certain subconscious biases inherent in the culture of everybody paler than us aren't even silent about this anymore. Scholars don't even have any weight with us anymore. So no, these so-called terrorists, if you want to call them that, these guys, many of whom actually are from local populations anyway, so they're not some you might call tragic desert mulatto. They're not even them, but they still don't get to come in. And I'm saying this as a Muslim who believes that we're supposed to be ruled by the Sharia. That's the valid rule. I'm saying this as one of those, but they don't get to come in and impose this on a darker mass of people or on behalf of a paler mass of people. And you got 3 black presidents in Africa saying this ain't gonna happen. The funny thing is that at the time that BRICS began, this division between black nationalities was promoted. The delineation it's been necessary, but it's always been there. It's not been sufficiently done. It's not, the objectivity has not been sufficient, but there's always been a delineation. However, the division, well, that was unaffordable. And look at when the division in the name of delineation was beginning to be promoted. Understand, when we heard about BRICS, it was already discussed. It didn't happen overnight. Keep that in mind. And it may be that because of an alternative payment system being inevitable at some point, that somebody sat up and said, you know what? We still have this directive to prevent the rise of any black messianic figures. I won't say Messiah. There's one Messiah, but a black messianic figure is still unaffordable in the States. So here's what we'll do. Because if power is going to shift, we still don't want it shifting to the darkest on the planet. That we don't want. Because believe you me, once a people see themselves as non-black, outside of certain exceptions like Southeast Asia, once a people see themselves as a separate race from black people, they are obsessed with maintaining their distinction from whoever's darker than them. Hell, even in Southeast Asia, they want to be pale. They just don't hate black folks. So they're only a few steps away from that themselves. But if you look at even the Middle Easterners, the North Africans, The Peninsula Arabs. They started off as black, and at some point when the average shade changed, they became obsessed with not getting darker. Right off the bat. And that's why I've looked at some of these other groups, and I've lost trust in them. How do I trust them if they're going to sit up and be obsessed about something like this? And Chinese are going to go into Africa and openly make fun of and mock African people until they had to be deported. The point I'm making is that our race still has the same enemies that we've had before. Tyler and the community from which he comes is not even one of those enemy communities. The colored community in South Africa is actually pretty distinct. See, for one, I should say pretty diverse. See, for one, the colored community in South Africa is not uniform. You have the colors of a black admixture and the colors that don't have any black admixture. Of those that have a black admixture, that community is divided actually on their opinions about us. Also, many people didn't know. That's part of the reason why it is that when Pink Book Lessons was able to bring these receipts were available in the first place because they spread virally, because this was not taken as common knowledge, actually. This is something that the people there had to begin to expose. That was the deal. You might have expected maybe a non-black admixed colored to have this opinion that black folks were lowly and inferior, but many of the black admixed colored, they were divided. How do you know? Because Robert McBride, who is officially listed as colored, took out one of the highest numbers of white folks in one fell swoop back during the apartheid struggle. He did it. Anti-apartheid. Took out a bunch of them, and then later on became a police chief. The cats, they will tell you in South Africa, they will tell you it is the color, and they're talking about the black admixed colors, they'll tell you it is them that are militant and fiery. They are the ones that will take any weapon and hurt anybody. That's what many of them will tell you. So it's not always as cut and dry as what we might think. But if we're going to hash out these delineations, which is an okay thing to do if we're going to be objective and nuanced about it, we need to start focusing on how we cooperate and what each other's doing so we can learn from each other and who the common enemies are. You can hash out disagreements without turning someone that's not an enemy into an enemy. That's what we've fallen. That's what we screwed up at, because we're not taking those that are actually enemies and saying to them, hey, look, you're an enemy because of what you've done. We're sitting up instead and saying you're an enemy because of who you're not. And we need to cut that mess out. That's what we screwed up at. We got every right to burn Burna Boy if he said that black Americans have no culture. Now, the only clip I saw was where he denied saying it. But if he actually said that, we got every right to burn him. And that's actually one of the things we could turn around and tell other Nigerians, listen, if you're going to support him, then you are part of the problem too, because, and it's not to say that he's not talented, but the issue is that he is divisive in saying some dumb stuff like that. Kai Sanat, did you really say that? Okay, you can use folks like that to draw the line. We have no culture. That's not possible. Your culture and ours alike have been trampled upon. It's to the point that black folks on both sides of the Atlantic are looking up to India as an example. And that's going to bring me to the next point. because you don't want your country to be like that. Not right now. We think that because of the numbers of people that are technically savvy and because of the engineers and the doctors that go from India into other countries, that they're a nation to which we can look up. No, the hell they're not. Land in India. Trust you me. Especially in its north. Got black folks looking up to a nation of people that can't get rid of traffic jams because they can't teach cows to stay the hell up off the road. And I'm not saying this out of hatred for them. But you know what? Let me go into the next point. Let's look at that guy from India that made that illegal U-turn in Florida. He decided to just go clear across a turnpike. Not only cutting, but cutting across all traffic lanes until someone plowed into him, and then his stupid behind had the nerve to sit there expressionless like, what just happened? Dummy, you know what just happened. They plied into your car they plied into your truck because you turned that thing across all these lanes to make a last second illegal U-turn because you didn't want to wait in traffic. And I don't blame him for not wanting to wait in traffic. I still can't understand what excuse there is for traffic jams on an interstate. And for what? Where's the stop sign? Where's the red light with your dumb behind? Go forward. I still don't get it, but nonetheless, what he did, he had to know that was going to cause a problem. And he didn't even seem to care afterwards. Everybody said that they saw the footage, and he didn't even care that some people had just killed him, accidentally killed themselves because of what he had done, which really means he killed them. They must have decapitated themselves, to be honest. And then on top of that, all of that was because his dumb behind was illiterate in English. Didn't know it, didn't speak it, wasn't supposed to be in the country. I'm going to tell y'all this, man. In all honesty, you got most black folk know not to go walking around in any country where they don't speak the language unless they got a translator with them. Or they're trying to learn the language or something like that. We would understand that. And if we do go somewhere where we don't speak it, we are visitors and we're not going to violate the immigration laws. From before the time I left the States, I tried to pick up some basic sentences of Arabic so that I could use those to build on other sentences. I could use that to build on to learn more. And people appreciated that. To be honest with you, they did. And the big cities in this country are largely bilingual. But I know damn well that there are certain jobs in this country I am not supposed to have. I'm just not supposed to do that. And I take issue with people that go into jobs or positions where they're supposed to be bilingual, or they said they were and then they're not, and I find out they lie. I take issue with that. I don't like that. It's not because they don't speak English, it's because they lied. That's what bothers me. What did you lie for? You know who does the most lying and saying they speak English when they don't in this country? People from India. They're the most likely to lie and say that they speak English and they speak Arabic and they speak Urdu and they speak whatever else, and turns out they don't speak any of them. Don't understand a damn thing. And won't tell you they don't understand. They'll just kind of guess what you mean, and if they screw up, they don't even say, my bad, I'm sorry, let me make that right. They don't care. Uneducated and dishonest. And to be honest with you, them and Egyptians have a serious problem. They don't even know the sound of human pain coming from someone that's not one of them. They don't know what that is. Like, you're a human and you make a sound of pain and you're not one of their people. They don't know what you're talking about. They are aggravating as hell. I've never been as dehumanized by somebody of our own race. It doesn't matter their nationality. That's not something they do. And they don't. The other thing about them is they don't say, "My bad, I made a mistake." They don't do that. Somebody from Africa actually causes you pain, and it could be an accident. It's my bad. I'm sorry, man. I wasn't trying to do that, or the equivalent in their language, and they'll try to help you out. They don't just recklessly injure people and then just they don't care, let alone cause a death and just not care. Except for maybe one particular language group that doesn't believe that anybody's their equal, and even other Africans are driving them out. I don't have to tell you who they are. But I'm not talking about they're not the race. That's just one particular group. I don't come across this. Most of us don't come across that all the time. We are sitting up here right now arguing over dumb stuff. And we got enemies that are still sitting up here and making plans for any of our countries, whether they're on the continent or in the Caribbean. And making plans for our neighborhoods in the States. And the fact remains that no, we don't need to support necessarily mass deportations, nor do we need to oppose them. That's between non-black folks, all of whom were happy and anxious to see us going. The only difference between attitudes previously and attitudes now is that some of your more politically right-leaning white folk feel like, well, at least a black American can understand what I'm saying. Have an easier time communicating, even though a lot of the world is English speaking. That truck driver really didn't have an excuse to not be able to speak and read English. You know why? India is the largest English speaking country. In the United States, English is not actually listed as the official language at the federal level. In India, English is the official language at the federal level. So he entered the States illegally through Mexico, and without learning anything, he was allowed to get as far as he got. He was allowed to do all of that, and what's the reason? Because he's not black. That's all it is. That's it. And that's something Democrats actually learn from Republicans. That's the end of that. That's why he was able to get as far as he did. They say he fled to California. I don't even know if he lived in Florida, to be honest with you. He may not have actually fled. That might have been just where he lived. He got picked up. That means they found him at some address. He probably lived there. And he got extradited back to Florida, as he should. And I'm glad to see that there's this reaction against California, because what the hell was California doing from the very beginning? They were doing what Republicans used to do a long time ago. Let these folks in as a buffer zone between us good white folk and them niggers over there. But what happened is that they found that the second and third generations began to still sound different. That's the thing that bothered them. That's if you really want to know why it is that why it's began to turn against some of these other communities, you'll notice that it has a lot to do with how it is that they sound and how they look. It had a lot to do with that. And truth be told, I don't think, and some people are wondering why it is that people for whom English is a second language were allowed to bypass the rules about English proficiency in order to get these CDLs that allowed them to drive these trucks. Because one thing that people are not saying, they're saying, well, they got these CDLs and they don't know how to read or write English, but nobody's saying that they're driving without CDLs. That's where the issue comes in. What the hell do you think they were allowed these CDLs for? For the specific purpose of not even black folk, but poor whites too, but certainly black folks simply not being able to get the jobs as easily. That's what that was. Not only were they going to take these jobs for less money, but it was also because white folk didn't want to pay us. They wanted the money for these jobs. They want to pay. They didn't want to pay us for it though. But those literacy tests that they had were just literacy tests like what they used to have for voting. See, a lot of us don't realize that. When southern states wanted to discriminate for voting, you could be black and registered to vote, but in order to do that, you had to pass literacy tests and answer correctly questions that even most white folk didn't know. But what if you were a white European immigrant and you became a naturalized United States citizen and you showed up at the courthouse to register to vote? Do you think, unless your English is just really bad, you think they would turn around and say, no, take this literacy test to make sure that you're allowed? No, they wouldn't. Literacy tests were designed to stop black folks from voting. That was after Reconstruction. That's what their purposes were. I don't think that those literacy tests were designed to stop paler skinned people who migrated into the U.S. and didn't know how to speak or read English properly or correctly from getting these CDLs. I don't think that's what it was about. I said a long time ago on another channel, I stated that when enough black folks, especially heterosexual black men, get into a particular field, they will try to shut us out of that field. Or they will try to simply drop the wages for that particular skill set. And they have an easy time doing it because of the psychological mindset of most of America any mother cuss word way. I stated that a long time ago before I had the name Black Heart or Black Mind. Completely different YouTube channel. I stated this. I told you. And I mean, you get enough black men going in and driving trucks, and okay, you know what? Here's what we can do. We can just bring in these other people. We'll exempt them from the literacy test. I'm all for black men going into these trades, but I'm also for black men going into different trades because the minute we flood into one, they're going to turn around and just start paying less for that. Because if it becomes dominated by us in their minds, that's automatically worth less. That skill automatically becomes worth less anyway because we're the ones that dominate in that skill. That's how they view it. They don't even have to organize themselves around that concept. It's already implanted in the subconscious. We are fighting white supremacy even at the subconscious levels of other people's minds and even our own, and we still got this nerve to sit up here and argue with each other about some damn music. Meanwhile, the AES is bringing France to its knees and setting an example for the other countries. What happens when the Lusophone countries begin to do the same thing to Portugal? Uh-oh. Then what? What happens if the former British colonies, one after the other, start to do the same thing? Who are they going to do that to? They're going to do it to the UK. Now, France is experiencing power outages already. They had a bedbug infestation, and I don't know if they still have that bedbug infestation or not, but they did have it. But they get power outages, riots, no-go zones, parallel societies, and I don't care. I don't particularly like any low-life trash that misbehaves at the expense of everybody else. But I'll tell you straight, I don't particularly care about how the French have been undermined in their own country. So damn what, you did it to everybody else. If I care about some France for, I can't wait until France is so poor that people start buying French slaves on markets. I can't wait until they start flooding the slave markets in northern Africa. Cannot wait. Man, I can't wait until the day that a French slave or ex-slave cannot rise up in society until they learn to speak French with either a West African or a Haitian accent. I can't wait until that day. I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to the day that they start changing their last names to some West African last names, trying to get ahead in society and stuff like that. But then again, I'm not sure I want them even in captivity on African soil. But the point is that our delineation has to be a delineation, and it needs to be a discussion of accurate facts with the nuance. The division is just, it's still unaffordable. The AES is not done yet. The fact that it exists does not mean that Africa and therefore the whole race is liberated. It's not that simple. So we have to understand that our delineation is actually, it needs to be for the purpose of cooperation against common enemies. We're not all the same. We're not all going to love each other. I've been saying that, but we still got same common enemies. Still got them. I'm not going to sit up here and say and start celebrating when white folks come and grab up Haitians. Okay, go ahead and grab that Mexican and can't stand black folks no way. When am I going to celebrate them grabbing up a Haitian? Now, if he's a Sambo sellout, fine. Go ahead and grab him up. But if he's not, why would I celebrate something like that? Who gave white folks the right to tell anybody black where to go? Go ask the Choctaw or the Seminole if that Haitian has the right to stay or go. You see, that's the moral thing to do. But the morality and the moral thing to do have been completely undermined and made unrealistic because of the immorality of massa. So I'm not going to champion their right to tell anybody to get lost. And we shouldn't either. And quiet as is kept, many folks on the continent who disagreed with Caribbean and African American black folks don't hate us. People from the continent don't just single out black Americans. They'll tell you Jamaicans are a lost people, but they're proud of their ancestry. And there's hope for them to not be so lost. You know what? Jamaicans will tell you that Jamaicans are a lost people who have a hope of being restored to their natural African selves. Whatever that's supposed to mean, because there's not one African identity. I've always said that. However, whatever they would have been, minus the corrupting British and Spanish influence, mostly British, might be something that might be a layer of their identity. It seems to be. And they want to go back to it. There's a part of them that wants to go back to it. But in any case, man, we think that we're just being singled out, and we're not. That's not what's going on right now. And I want us to get that out of our heads. We're not really being singled out as FBA per se. Black folks been disagreeing with each other for the longest. And then we really got bigger fish to fry about whether or not Luke Campbell of Two Live Crew, who was FBA or something else, and if he was sent to corrupt African American culture with his music. Because Too Short's 100% FBA, and he and Two Live Crew were the raunchiest artists back in their day. Just both of them just raunchy. And this was before you really had gangster rap on the nationwide scene like that. Ain't nobody saying that anybody in NWA was anything other than FBA. And they called themselves NWA, niggas with attitude. And they really propelled gangster rap onto the nationwide scene. They had cats in my neighborhood, a Huxtable neighborhood, talking about, man, it might be fun to live in Compton. It looks like it's so much fun on TV. No, the hell it's not. Nothing fun about that. So no, the truth be told, the debauchery even has been across the board with us. Even the debauchery, even that. The righteousness, the debauchery, the loyalty, and the selling out, the disloyalty, the treachery. All of these things have permeated all of our nationalities. And we're just going to have to uh, simply sit down and honestly and objectively, cool headedly categorize and catalog the acts of loyalty and treachery of which we know from any particular corner. For the sake of historical accuracy, that's it. And we're going to have to learn that when we don't agree with each other about something, we treat it like a disagreement because our enemies, well, even our enemies from within are serving outside enemies and getting their orders from them. And the goal of both of them is for us to not even exist anymore. And what they're against is a hair texture and a nose width and a lip fullness and a melanin count. That's what it is that the enemies are against. They're not against a particular language or dialect of a language that we might speak. They're not against a particular type of print that we might put on our cloths for cultural reasons. They're not against these. The actual enemies we have from within and without are not against any of these nationalist or tribalist variations of us. They are against the race. They don't want there to be an African race again. That's what they're looking for. And they got allies that ain't even just white all the time. I hope this helps. I hope this clarifies some things for you. If we're going to argue, let's at least make it about something more substantial than just a musical influence that can't really be proven or disproven to have been from another musical influence. Let's cut that mess out. Tyler's not worth arguing over. Never has been. Burna Boy's not really worth arguing over. Neither is Busta Rhymes. Doesn't matter where their parents came from or where they're from. They're not worth arguing over because they're not liberators. They're not oppressing us and they're not liberating us. They're not really doing either one. They're entertainers. It's really not even, if they admit that all they are is entertainers, then it's really not fair to them to put all these arguments on stuff they've done and said. And I'm not saying it's even out of sympathy for them. Burna Boy ain't paying a damn bill of mine. And it's not his job to. Neither is Busta Rhymes. Ain't his job. Tyler's job isn't to pay any of my damn bills. And the artists that are 400% FBA, for that matter, it was never their job to pay any of my bills either. That's not where the argument is supposed to lie. The better argument is going to be in how it is that if a Chinese person gets deported from one country that is majority black because of racist statements they have made, that all other black nations can have access to know that this person and what biographical information on that person identifies them so that they can't just go renew a passport and then get a visa to go into another black nation with that attitude. That's the stuff that we need to argue about. These are the things worth arguing about. When some of the Chinese go into Zimbabwe and they start committing illegal exports, exporting things that the country has banned from being exported or even harvested from within, like elephant tusk as an example. When they go in and they do something like this and they get arrested and jailed and deported, how is it that another nation can have access to the same information? Another black nation. That's the thing to argue about. That's the discussion worth having. How about the minute that one person that ain't black resists the police in any black jurisdiction and they get sent away for that, that every single other black government can find out about that particular person and know that they don't respect authority coded in melanin, so they can't get visas. Nobody with that name and date of birth and that height can get a visa and permission to go into any other black jurisdiction. How about that? Instead of some damn who started rap, who started hip hop, who started rhythm and blues and rock and roll, and who started reggae and dance. Okay, screw all that. You're never going to prove the birth date of this stuff. A genre of music doesn't have one birthday. You'll be arguing forever. If I hated black folks, that's the argument I'd want you to get caught up in. I wouldn't want you to discuss, okay, you know what? If I go and I disrespect black folks, how are they going to cooperate with each other so that I can't go to another black location and set up shop over there again? That's what I wouldn't want you to talk about. Start thinking before you get into these arguments. And truth be told, I can't tell Dennis Sperling. He doesn't even know I exist. He can't remember me, and he wouldn't listen to me anyway. I don't cam up because I don't have a law degree and lawyer money. So I can't convince him to not sue Neferkari Dessalines, nor can I convince him to drop the amount of the lawsuit from Neferkari Dessalines. I can't convince him of any of that. I wish I could, but I can't. I could also say that he does have a valid point. You can disagree with Dennis Sperling, but you shouldn't call him a failed lawyer. I could say, okay, yeah, that's a valid point. He shouldn't call you a failed lawyer. But if you're not a failed lawyer, then what do you need his money for to make up for? Did you actually lose business? But I would also say this. Neferkari Dessalines is the reason that I'm learning as much as I am about the AES and what they've done. I kept forgetting the names of the other two AES leaders. Now I can remember the name of Assimi Goïta because of Neferkari Dessalines. Some of us would say, no, man, that's a tether because of what he said about Dennis Sperling. No, he disagreed with him. That doesn't make him a tether. See, he never lied about his origins and his ancestry anyway. When the term tether first came out, it meant someone that lied. They would try to pass themselves off as us when they were doing, especially if they were doing something bad. And then they would take out the national flags and the cultural garb whenever they were celebrating the graduations or job promotions or something like that. That's what we were calling a tether. In the beginning, that's what it meant, to tether yourself to someone. So, he never was one. And so what I'm going to say is that, even to be honest with you, just to be fair, if we were willing to drop money, and I'm saying this to black folks of every single nationality, if you were willing to drop money into the pockets of artists like NWA, and like those debaucherous artists that made that song Boteo, I think coming out of Ivory Coast, because that was debauchery. It was a big hit amongst Anglophone Africans at all the parties in Atlanta, but it was a French song, and it was debaucherous. But if we were willing to put money into the pockets of these artists like this, debaucherous artists on both sides of the Atlantic, not to mention certain Anglophone Caribbean nations, then let's call it what the hell it is. Neferkari should be collecting a hell of a lot more for the information he's covering for the history that he teaches. And I would say that when Attorney Sperling covers history, he should be getting a lot more. However, I think he's already collecting both from the AdSense and from the super chats, as well as from his law practice. So I think he's already collecting it. But why is it that Neferkari can't collect the same amount as these artists? Hell, why can't Edward Anderson collect the same amount as these artists? That's something that is wrong with us, and that doesn't depend on nationality. It does not make a difference what nationality we are: Trinidadian, Jamaican, Ivorian, Nigerian, Liberian, Ghanaian, Togolese, Beninese, Cameroonian. It doesn't make a bit of difference. Bajan, FBA. It don't make a difference what our nationality is. We like our art debaucherous, and we put money into it. And even though our enemies will promote them to us more, we let our enemies do this, and we will turn around and put more money into their pockets. We allow that to be lucrative. Levert, oh man, they were on top of things in '88. I remember that. Summer '88, man, Levert was still on top of things. You could still hear that song Casanova on the radio. By the summer of '89, you were never going to hear that song again. By '91, Gerald Levert, with his big old self, was trying to wear starter jackets and beanies to try to appeal to the masses of consumers now that wanted nothing but gangster rap, and he can't even rap. It's not his job to. He was a singer. But the whole group was losing money at that point, or they weren't making the same revenue because of where we were willing to put our money. And while this was going on in Black America, something similar was going on in Liberia. And now we know about this being a problem, and generally speaking, and well, pretty much in the continent. Starts off with a little sexual slackness, as the Jamaicans might call it. A little slackness here and there, mostly about nature. And it's understandable because it's right next to songs about romance. But then it's a slippery slope, and it goes into other forms of debauchery, and now we got mumble rap about popping drugs, popping pills, shooting up. And still we got some of the violent debauchery about shooting up. So shoot up with a needle and shoot up with the pistol. We got all of this foolishness. And we put money into those pockets. Meanwhile, the ones that in the black manosphere actually educate you all, who deserve more money even than what I might deserve, if I deserved anything at all, they can't get a dime compared to the artist. I'm sorry, but as a race of people, content creators like Home Team History, Edward Allen Anderson, Nefakari, many others would have buckets of money coming in. Buckets. If we were really as righteous a race as we're supposed to be. And we have a reason to have a racial identity. Other races don't have that because they've not really been united against on the basis of race to the same extent. Asians aren't united against by the rest of the world on the basis of race. It's just Europeans that are united against them to a certain extent. And half the time they're touted as a model minority as long as they come from the right parts of Asia. But does Africa unify against any part of Asia at all? No. Africa does not unify against a particular Asian country, let alone the race. They just don't do it. You can't even get Africa to unify against China. No matter how many Chinese violate mining and other export laws in Africa, no matter how many Chinese are willing to resist the authorities who show up to enforce these laws, no matter how many, you can't get Africa to unite against China on the basis of it being China, let alone on the basis of it being Asia. Can't do it. Won't happen. Not right now, at least. So we don't unite against other people, but almost everybody else will unite against us. Almost. to the point we have black anoia, and it's not even a made up phenomenon. I mean, it may be mistaken, but it's not a made up reaction from nothing. We're not reacting to nothing at all. Like they say, it's not paranoia if somebody's really out to get you. So if there's a race that has the right to erase my identity, it would be ours. But I'm going to be honest with you, the righteousness that's going to have to come inside of this identity. Well, I've already told you where you can find a blueprint and an explanation for the righteousness. In addition to the conscience that even other species have, let alone human beings, you can get more details of it refined in a source I've already explained to you from the very beginning of my channel. I've already talked about that. But that righteousness that we know about just from the human conscience is sorely lacking right now at this point. We have it in that we don't start racial conflicts, but we're lacking it in some other things. And part of that is the reason why we'll sit up and argue with each other about some damn music and get lost in that argument. Meanwhile, those who plot and plan against us are still able to profit from it. France should be on its knees. It shouldn't be on the way to being on its knees. The collapse of its economy should not be this slow. It should be on its mother cuss word knees, because if we were really about that, then it wouldn't just be the AES and Chad only by themselves. It would be every single country on a continent from which France can extract resources at any margin profitable to its own economy. We'll be looking at France and saying, you're going to pay us more. Okay, now that they won't sell you this, we're going to sell you this at a higher price because the supply just went down, the demand stayed the same, therefore the price rose up. This is your own market. You call it capitalism. So we, Cote d'Ivoire, are not going to deal with you the way that we did before, because you no longer are supplementing what we sell to you from Burkina Faso, because they won't let you in. Same with Mali, same with Niger. So now you're going to pay us more because we're the only ones playing ball with you. Oh, you won't? Well, screw you. You're not buying it. You're not getting anything from us either, because you got other people that are willing to buy at a fair market price from us. Yeah, I bet you Turkey will talk about a market price. Go on, France. Fit the guck on out of here. Close down this embassy too. You're done. See, if we were really about that, these are the things that would have wound up being the case. And it's on its way, but it would have been much quicker, much faster. The French would be sneaking into Spain and Portugal and Italy and Germany and Switzerland and Austria and Luxembourg and Belgium and Holland, and they would be getting kicked the uck out because people would just be tired of them. All these French refugees coming in here speaking French, they don't know how to speak our languages. I don't want to hear that stuff. Begging for change out on the street, selling box, dealing drugs. Kick them back to France. The French will be sailing across the Mediterranean, hoping to get refuge and some economic opportunity in North Africa. If we were really about the righteousness about which we should be. But I've gone on for an hour and 8 minutes now, and I really appreciate that patience that you have. I've noticed that when I do talk about the cooperation that black folks are going to need, all of a sudden the views go down. But hey, you know what? The truth is the truth, even if a fewer people hear it. And the truth is that we still have enemies. We got common enemies. And so it's going to behoove us not to always like, let alone love each other, but it would behoove us to be willing to discuss delineation civilly so that we can cooperate with each other against these common enemies, because all they see is one big monolithic Negro that they want extinct. Thanks for listening. As always, black heart, black mind, black out, assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual, non-select male power, because they don't like it in black patriarchy until extinction of Judgment Day. Thank you for flying with us again here on Jet Black Air, with the phrase Jet Black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender justice forever.